this time, scholars have credited Luther for never wanting to be called a Lutheran. They cite a time when he exhorted his followers to never call themselves Lutheran.
However, most people don't realize my views on being a Lutheran actually changed. What brought about that change? It was when the Lutherans finally had their chance to put forth their Christian confession at the Diet of Augsburg in 1530. There, they presented to the Holy Roman Emperor a document known as the Augsburg Confession.
I'm all for binging new content, but I'm not sure I can take any more of this puppet. He doesn't really think he's me, does he?
I'm not sure you understand what a puppet is. You do know that someone's controlling the puppet, right?
In order to understand the relevance and significance of the Augsburg Confession, it's helpful to be familiar with three things: the historical events and context that shaped the Augsburg Confession, the documents contributing to the writing, and lastly, the reception and later use of the confession. In this episode, we'll talk about the reception and later use.
For about 9 years, nothing was changed in the Augsburg Confession. It became the platform on which the Reformers, now known as Protestants, stood and on which they based strategic, political, and military alliances. The Schmalkald League, for example, used the Augsburg Confession as the primary basis for their identity. Because the League was premised on subscription to the Lutheran Confession, the Augsburg Confession essentially became a Lutheran constitution, or bylaws in function.
In 1540, to further more alliances, and for a number of strategic reasons, Melanchthon adjusted the Augsburg Confession. This modified or adjusted Augsburg Confession is known as the Variata. It contained a slight variation in the wording on the Lord's Supper and a blunting of the language regarding the true presence of the body and blood of Christ in the Lord's Supper. And while the changes seemed modest in number, the ramifications were fairly significant. We'll talk at length about some of those ramifications in other episodes, but for now, just be aware that even in the constitution of contemporary Lutheran denominations and in many congregational constitutions, you'll see them referring to the unaltered Augsburg Confession, meaning the one that was presented to Charles V on June 25, 1530.
As I mentioned earlier, even though the Augsburg Confession was intended to be a confessional document in nature, it certainly became more and more a political document through the years. There were princes and territories that were hung out to dry. In other words, given up by the Reformers to the Roman Catholics, because their electors and city councils refused to sign the confession. And to this day, this document plays a critical role in Lutheran churches, at times politically, but at this point, more and more in the sense of a document that grounds us in what it means to be a Lutheran.
So, what are you doing?
I think maybe you need to take a break. I can take you back over to your house. I think Chris wanted to talk to you a little bit later, and it might be good to get a nap in.
Here's a Luther quote for you. We old folks have to find our cushions and pillows in our tankards. Strong beer is the milk of the old.
So, nap